G'day everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Crabtree Performance Podcast. Today, I am incredibly fortunate to be joined by one of the absolute best in the game, Paul Xydis, also known as the Bodybuilding Physio. Paul is a world-class physiotherapist, a competitive bodybuilder, and the director and founder of Paddo Performance, an elite facility he runs alongside his wonderful partner, Dani. He is also the co-founder of MyTrainingSpace. And if that's not enough, he is the co-host of the Barbell Bros podcast with none other than Mike Pearson. Paul brings an unmatched wealth of knowledge, experience, and passion into everything he does. And today we're diving into it all. His journey in the industry, his approach to physio and performance, and what having high-level intelligence and an in-depth experience in the bodybuilding industry can perpetuate.
As we proceed to give you what you need.
How you been?
Yeah, good. Just squatted before, so I'm pretty roasted, which is good.
Just at the gym?
Yeah. Just finished up training, did a couple of clients, and yeah, looking forward to this.
Yep.
Oh, it's always nice being on a podcast when you're not the host.
Yeah, bro. It's I've said like recently it's been strange hosting because obviously I speak to, and you would as well, you speak to people all day, but hosting is a different thing than just talking in normal because you're trying to get across a few points and get to some topics, but you also have to, or you want to try and organically get the conversation there rather than just interrupt and be like, oh, let's talk about this now, because then it just sounds weird.
Yeah, I found because we obviously our Barbell Bros podcast, it took a while to turn it from just like a conversation, because you still want to keep it flowing like a convo, but still obviously address a few key points. Whether you're addressing kind of what's happening in the bodybuilding world, or you're just trying to delve into anabolics or something. You want to make it come across organically without being too scripted, because your listeners would know if something's just kind of scripted. It doesn't really sound that good.
Yeah, 100%. We've been trying to get you on here for a bit. We've been playing tag. You've had something and I've had something, and
it's busy season for you, I'm guessing, because you've had the comp season's up. You'd be flat out right now.
Yeah, the last week and a half has fucking nearly buried me. But back in Sydney now, so I've only got I had 2 in Melbourne, which was a week and a half ago, or a week ago. Then had 4 in SA on the weekend that had just gone. But that was probably the most fatiguing coaching experience I've ever had, purely because the way the venue was set up. It's usually been at a different venue for the last 4 or 5 seasons, but whoever the promoters who were involved in running the SA show are no longer doing it. So the IFBB shifted venues, and basically, if you're coaching, usually you'd want to try and minimize the amount of running between backstage and the viewing, that you have to do. And at the other venue, I'd be backstage with the athletes, whether it's 4 or 5, however many, and then you'd make a quick trip, maybe 50 meters, to be able to watch, and then you go backstage and you just kind of keep looping the loop. Whereas this was fucking through a corridor, up 2 flights of stairs, around a whole 150 meters of university campus, then through the open doors, through the line of people that are lining up to buy tickets, through into the stadium arena, or whatever you'd call it, and then you sit down, you'd watch them, and then you'd run back. And I ended up doing 17,000 steps within that confined area. And then it sounds like I'm not enjoying it, but I'm really lucky that I'm able to have a lot of the athletes that I coach come to those shows, because there's a lot of them in South Australia and they come and watch. But when I'm running between a big open space, I'm often going past someone and being like, sorry, I can't talk, I've got to go. And you almost feel bad. You can't stop. Yeah. So just all of that was extremely exhausting. But yeah, the overlap of coaching at this time of year is, and it's probably not, when people are like, oh, why do coaches, say that it's this demanding, whatever. With regards to this season, I was peaking the athletes for the Melbourne show. So let's just say there was that. So that was 2 of them, which I enjoy doing. But then I was practice peaking the athletes who are competing this week in Sydney. And then I was getting ready to set up the athletes who are peaking. So this is day-to-day updates, getting ready to peak the athletes who are going to peak in Adelaide. Then coincidingly with that Melbourne show, 11 of the 15 athletes I've got competing in season C started their preps.
Oh, wow.
So I was starting their preps. And then you've got just the normal updates and stuff. So it's like 5 times the workload that you're already doing.
Coaching's hard, man. Coaching's hard, especially when, like, obviously with you, a lot of your clients would be goal-driven in terms of competing. So, you know, right now when they're all on that same ship together, it would be very difficult. And then there's obviously the post-show feeling, trying to keep some of those clients, you know, where's their head at post-show and what are their goals. Some, you know, coming into a show, you feel like you're going to, you know, have the most structured off-season and build all this muscle, and then, you know, 3 days into post-show, you're just cooked and you take 2 weeks off, and, you know, you eat whatever, and it's just hard to manage all those people's kind of goals and personalities and where they're all at. So
you're having to put on a lot of different hats. You know, for some people you have to be, and it would be the same I'm sure in physiotherapy and kind of, you know, rehabilitation. You have to speak to someone a certain way about what they're going through, and then you have to speak to someone else a completely different way based on their personality. Like if you were to tell me, hey bro, this is the fucking, you know, gist of it, this is what you need to do for recoverability, and this is how long you're going to be out, I'd be like, sweet, I'm ready to attack it, let's get into it. Frustrating, but we've been there. Whereas you might have someone else, you know, you have to be like, oh, you know, we could set up and this and that, so they don't feel, you know, demoralized by the fact they've got 8 months worth of work before they can train the same way they used to. But
I find it's a lot of, with my services now, I mean, I really just, anyone that inquires, any new client, I kind of look over their inquiry form, and I kind of screen it, and I don't know, I just look at it and I know whether that client's going to be able to work well with me. And anyone that I think, whatever their issue is, or have a detail they fill the form out, if it's someone that I believe would work better with one of my other physios or staff here based on availability or whatever they want to achieve, I'll just refer them. But then there might be someone that I think, okay, well, I'm the only one that I feel confident with that can take this client on. I'll jump on a call with them before I even do a session. I'll just get on a call for, you know, 5-10 minutes and just suss them, and then I just want to get a good vibe from that client, because to be fair, I don't really have the energy all the time. Rehab is a very emotional roller coaster with a lot of clients, and if you do take on the wrong client, which I have in the past, it actually doesn't, no matter what the fee you charges, it's really just not worth it if you're not going to get the results, and if that client's not willing to do what they need to do for that, especially with the way I treat. It's very movement-based, program-based. If they don't follow that, it's a waste of time, really.
I think there's a certain component or similarities that translate from what you do versus what a coach does, or at least a coach that has, you know, the care and investment. And that a lot of people think, you know, okay, I'm going to apply for this coach, I'm going to apply for this physio, they're going to take me on and they're going to do this. But when you have the level of care that yourself does for each person that you want to work with, there's a level of investment. I know that, you know, if I'm putting in a certain level of time and effort and energy and emotional investment into this athlete, I want that to be reciprocated on their end. And as you said, I know that it's pretty evident to me immediately upon a consultation call when I know just the person's attitude or the way they're speaking. It sounds harsh and it sounds like you're making quick judgments, but when you've worked with that many people, you can pretty well tell almost immediately. And I think every time I've gone, I'll give this person the benefit of the doubt, I'll give this person the chance, it's come back, maybe not immediately, but it's come back 4, 6, 8 weeks later to just have been a waste of my time. So I really trust my intuition or my immediate judgment, as harsh as it can be sometimes these days, rather than being like, oh, I'll give that person a little bit of leeway, because they may be well-intentioned, but they just may not respond to the way I coach or I, you know, kind of verbalize implementation or information. And I know that would be very similar for yourself.
Once you got the runs on the board as well, like, I mean, once you've actually got, you have the results, you know what works. Once you're confident in your systems, once you're confident in what you preach and what you practice, once you are confident in all that, then you know what you do works. And someone doesn't want to, you know, jump on and appreciate that, then, you know, there'll be somebody else that definitely would. Yeah, there's enough clients out there. I always tell people there's plenty of clients out there. There's plenty of work. The work is endless. Yeah. The clients are endless. It's just how well you present yourself as, whether you're an online coach or a physio or, you know, bodybuilding specialist, posing coach, whatever it is. There's plenty of work out there. It's just how well you look after your existing clients and how well you leverage from them, and people see you. And word of mouth is one of the most powerful tools. So if you get results, people will find out about you. That's what I've always told people. There's plenty of clients. It's a very saturated market. You know, the online,
especially these days.
It's very saturated. But I'll tell you something. as saturated as it is, there's a very small amount of people that actually get good results. So it's not saturated in quality; it's just saturated in quantity. So there's plenty of opportunities out there for people that are actually good at what they do.
Yeah, I think we may have had this conversation before, or I may have had it with someone at the gym, but like I almost feel when I have discussions with other coaches or people in the space, oftentimes I'll hear them talk about how frustrating that quantity is and how saturated it is. And I can sort of understand where they're coming from with regards to those frustrations, but I feel like the more shit there is, the easier it is to identify the actual quality. You know, when there's only very few, you're kind of like, it's not as easily identifiable of who is doing a fantastic job and who is not, because likely there's probably more people that are doing a good job. Whereas when people just jump in the industry, whether it's physiotherapy, whether it's coaching, the cream rises to the top very quickly and you can see the results, or at least in the coaching space. And I'm sure physiotherapy would be very similar and rehabilitation would be very similar, but a lot of people can get results. Like a lot of coaches can get results for a client, whether it's a competitive, like it's not the most challenging thing isn't getting the result in terms of getting someone in a condition or putting them on stage or whatnot. It's the most challenging thing is getting them those results in a way that is not going to negatively impact their lives for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
You know, if I just crash dieted everybody from 20 weeks out, it wouldn't affect me in the slightest. Would they still get the results? Would they still be conditioned? Would they present as well? Would their physique be as full and as lively? Probably not. But the result is, and the goal is to get fat off. And I could do that in a much simpler way for me, whereas the actual quality comes through how you get those results and then how those people can continue to move forth afterward. And I'm sure it's very similar in yourself, when there's a variety of different approaches to rehabilitation and whatnot.
That's the educational journey. I think it's not just, you're not just a coach for results, you're a coach to understand the rationale and the processes you put in place. So if I prescribe an exercise or I prescribe something in a program, I never prescribe without rationale or understanding, so that client understands why. If they understand the why, then they'll be more inclined to actually stay on board and follow the plan. If you just prescribe something and they have no idea why they're doing it, the chances are they're probably not going to do it. Especially with rehab, I give multiple exercises multiple times a day to people for them to, say, rehab a shoulder or a knee. And if they're going to be spending a lot of time every day doing their exercises without dropping off, they need to know why. Why am I doing this? What's it strengthening? What's it going to influence? How's it going to affect my squat? How's it going to affect my deadlift? Why is this going to allow me to leg press again? You need to justify them. You need to give them those responses. But as well, on the back of that, I think it's just finding your niche, your demographic. A lot of people are too broad with their scope of practice. They say, I will work with anyone. A gen pop athlete's very different to an elite level bodybuilder. If you try and cover all that, you're actually not going to be able to work with any of them. I think picking your specialty is the most important thing. And once you hone in on that specialty, I called myself a bodybuilding physio in 2016. That's what my Instagram name. I just said, I'm going to call myself the bodybuilding physio. I just competed in one bodybuilding comp, but I was like, who's to tell me that I can't help bodybuilders? And from that moment, I just called myself that and just worked with bodybuilders early on. And my experience just was with that demographic of clients. And before you know it, I knew how to fix bodybuilders.
Yeah. And speaking on that, while we're on the topic, is that what you enjoy the most? Do you get the most satisfaction from helping a bodybuilder go from, a certain, let's use Mike, because everybody knows that example. Does that bring you the most fulfillment in your work, taking Mike or an athlete of that quality, of that caliber, from where they were, thinking that they're going to have to take up, I think it's, what was it, like famously bushwalking and bike riding. They're going to have to take it from there, take him back into that space where, there's probably a certain component of that athlete that thinks they're never going to be able to do the thing they did again. Is that what brings you the most fulfillment, or is it just kind of, what you enjoy?
I think for me, it was the ability to, there's a lot of rehab specialists or physios or coaches that can help someone with no experience go from nothing to get results because, their body is quite responsive. You can just get them in some kind of program or give them some kind of rehab exercise and they'll see progress. But for me, it was, how do I get the elite, the absolute elite, the absolute top in their field? How can I make them better? For me, that was where I felt there was a real need in that. There was there was a hole in that part of the industry where you would look at bodybuilders and powerlifters and people who, you know, they're not as prevalent as your Gen Pop. They're very rare to find. How can you take that person and fix them? Because all the communication with GPs and other physios, they won't experience, didn't understand, they didn't have any empathy for those athletes. They didn't get what bodybuilding was. They didn't get what bodybuilding, what is it, a pageant? Are you displaying your physique? Just stop training, they would say, because for them, it's like, it's not really a sport anyway. They didn't understand that. So for me, I'm passionate about it because I understand the psychological elements behind bodybuilding. I understand it's so much more than just lifting weights. I understand there's limited information among healthcare professionals with rehabilitating bodybuilders. So I did take a lot of pride in knowing that I understood them. And I think just sitting down with a competitor and having a conversation where you actually say, I understand what you want to do. I understand where you want to go, and I want to help you with this issue. You've already, you know, that's half the rehab done. Automatically their guard goes down. They start to relax and actually start to listen to what you have to say, because they know that there's not many people that can understand their language. Like, I had a client, for example, the other week was sending me quarter turn photos, and they wouldn't be able to send that to another physiotherapist. They'd be like, it's a different language. What am I looking at here? You know?
Yeah, exactly. So it was kind of a combination between, obviously you're someone who thoroughly enjoys bodybuilding, and it's very well known, at least in the gym, how much you love the old school bodybuilding. So you kind of combined what you were interested in and also identified a space within the physiotherapy industry that you could fill, that was probably, you know, just intelligence from a business standpoint, which is really cool as well. It's not just I'm just going to kind of fall in here. You were like, oh, I've identified that this kind of coincides with what I love, and let me fucking attack this and be the best at it.
Exactly what you just said there. I mean, I was always passionate. I was always a bit of a loner, like, in terms of, I just liked my own space growing up, and I would love the fact that the gym gave me that ability to just kind of be on my own. I met a lot of people and had a lot of friends at the gym, but for me, it was at night time. I would go to the gym on my own. I'd put my headphones in. I really liked that time to myself, and I just thought, how can I pick a career path where I can still do this, love training and be around this, and create my life. You know, how can I generate an income from this, basically? So from a young age, I recognized, being a physiotherapist was the highest kind of honor in terms of the fitness industry. It was, you're below a doctor, obviously, but you're still relevant to weights and training and whatnot. So for me, that was the highest qualification that I could get and still be on the gym scene. So I worked really hard to get that qualification, and my job afterwards was to fuse the two. And I didn't really believe in having to go work for someone for too long. I always believe that, if you practice what you preach and you do your own study, that it's, you can get results that way. So I didn't really work for anyone after uni. I kind of just started contracting out of a few places, and I learned on the tools. Like I would work with clients and assess what they were doing, and sometimes my assessments weren't great, and I improved that skill over time. And I did see that there was such a there was room in that space. How many physiotherapists actually understand bodybuilding in this country? 10 years ago there was none. There was 2 or 3. I had Dr. Andrew Locke, who passed away recently. He was a mentor of mine early on. He was someone that I looked at and I just go, this guy gets it. Like, he's the one. He's got the tools to assist bodybuilders and powerlifters, and I just loved the ability to kind of speak a different language. Bodybuilders are a different breed of people, and so misunderstood. It was so misunderstood when they go and see other clinicians. So I was just so happy that I could provide that almost relief when they would come and just chat to me about rehab.
Yeah. Well, we've jumped a little bit forward, but touching on that and kind of how you got into, firstly, physiotherapy and whatnot, I wanted to give you at least, a couple minutes to explain or give the listeners a little bit of a rundown into you yourself, like your kind of upbringing, and what you were like as a youngster, and growing up, and what your intentions were, if you had any, in regards to what you intended or expected of your life up until this point, and where you are, and kind of how you, obviously I know a little bit, but how you kind of ended up where you are now. Oh,
thanks for that. It's nice to have it's nice to be able to talk about your story. It's rare that I've been asked that question, but it is nice to just basically speak how it all kind of unfolded. I grew up in a Greek house. I'm Greek myself, and I got two extremely hardworking parents that were self-made with business, and I always looked up to them in terms of their ability to run small businesses. And my mum's a very successful hairdresser. She's probably one of the best in the world. So automatically from a young age, I didn't
like
have any,
celebrities and stuff, doesn't she?
she's the best of the best. I mean, she's the top thing. Like right now, she's on her way to Malta. She's on her way to Morocco and Malta. She's traveled the world with A-list celebrities, not Z-list, like Natalie Portman and supermodels, high-end supermodels in runway fashion. So for me, from a young age, there was a lot of barriers. I had no barriers to success. I would look at what my mum was doing, and for me, sky was the limit with opportunities. I never put any limiting beliefs on my ability to just go out and have a crack, because I saw what she was able to do, and it was just the norm for me. I would go to Nicole Kidman's house as a kid because my mum was doing her hair, and I would just sit in in the lounge room and wait for my mum to finish. But it was pretty cool that she was able to do these things and still have me and my brother. There was no. And she still ran 3 hairdressing salons that they were self-made. So for me, from a young age, I always saw that. I was ingrained with the ability to have that employer mindset. I always had the idea of working for myself and seeing what they did. So going through school, I went to a great school. I did apply myself at the right times. I did enjoy my studies. I'm not going to sit here and say that I hate school and I dropped out. And no, I worked hard, and I saw that the opportunity to become, get into the physio sphere later on. I started training. My first kind of training, I played footy. I played rugby at school. Loved it, and from there I wanted to bulk up a little bit. And my mum actually got me into boxing. I did 3 years of boxing. I had a coach, and I loved boxing. I'd be training 4 days a week, and I loved all the bodyweight stuff. We did a lot of chin-ups and dips and push-ups and a lot of conditioning. But boxing coach said, go to the gym one day. I want you to put on a few kgs. And, I went to the gym, and 1 week later I quit boxing because I just said, I love weights. I just couldn't believe how fun it was. I didn't know what I was doing, but I just loved the ability that I could just go on my own and just not have to rely on anyone or not have to be with anyone. Like, I just was able to go whenever I wanted to go and train. And I fell in love with it when I was 15. And from that moment, my brain was just so fixated on weightlifting and training, and it was the priority. And I just wanted to bridge that gap, like we mentioned before, about finding a way to create a life out of it. And physiotherapy was something that allowed me or gave me the belief that I could. So I studied my friggin' ass off in HSC because physio is very hard to get. It's like 99.95 across all unis. And I got in, and I was very grateful to get in, and somehow made it through that terrifying degree. It was excruciatingly challenging.
How many years were you studying for?
I was in 5 years at uni. Yeah, 5 years. I had a bit of a hiccup in the third year, where I failed a couple of subjects because I was just had a lot going on at that time, because it was just hard. You're 21 years old, start dating girls, start going out, doing all these things, and before you know it, you're like, damn, I got 49% in an exam, so I've got to wait another year. So during that time,
it's crazy to think that I was having this conversation as well, that when you're 18 years old and you've got to go out obviously into the world and choose what you want to study, that you're supposed to know what you love at that point in your life that you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. I look back and think about what I enjoyed or what I was interested in when I was 18. And bodybuilding, obviously, but it's completely different to what I enjoy now. And part of that was just because I didn't want to be perceived to be a certain way when I was that age. I was like, I don't want my friends to think that I'm, interested in history or interested in fucking, this type of stuff or drama or whatnot. But, now as a 26-year-old, I'm like, I would have, but so many people kind of jump in. So it's cool that you kind of knew to a certain extent, like, at least this is where I want to go. And
I just picked something that I knew that I said, look, I'm going to pick something that I enjoy the most, an area that whether it's money or not, it's just an area that I wake up and I'm interested in. And then I believe that the money and the success comes secondary to that. Going back to my parents, they said, if you find something you love, you never really have to work in your life. You'll always be doing something you love, and the success will be a byproduct of your passion towards it. Because if you're enjoying every day, naturally you're going to put more energy into it. You're not just going to clock off at 5 and stop working. You're always going to be actively working on it. So for me, after uni, I was able to, I built some good relationships during uni, and I went and worked with a doctor in North Crow's Nest. I was doing a bit of hands-on therapy, so I was very hands-on as a physio. We did a lot of active release techniques. because I loved all that hands-on work, and I really thought that was the primary rehab tool for physio. Get your hands on the client, do a lot of assessments with your hands and observations. And then I also had a job at Base Gym with Australian Strength Coach. I was the physio there, and I had a great opportunity there with Bass, and I knew Bass for a long time beforehand, and then that taught me more or less about the strength side of things. So I was still very hands-on in that physio department. But then when I met Andrew Locke, through that whole connection there, he taught me that the best method, or showed me that the best method for rehab is actually not with using your hands, and more with using the tools available with movement. So using your brain and understanding what that client needs from a movement standpoint. And then I stopped working with that doctor in Crow's Nest, put all my energy into working at North Sydney-based gym, and I had the privilege of working with some of the biggest strength athletes. I didn't really understand a lot about powerlifting. I didn't really understand a lot about strength work. But being in that environment for so long, I found a direct correlation between strength training and rehabilitation, purely because the strength training side of things was so technical, so progressive, movement-based, technical-based. Powerlifters move so well. And I tried to apply that same base to my bodybuilders, because I found there was a lot of things that bodybuilders were missing. A lot of the injuries, or the overuse injuries that we're seeing in bodybuilders, were because they were neglecting a lot of the movement patterns that the powerlifters were putting into their training. And just having a combination between strength work, obviously the bodybuilding focus, but then the rehab backbone, I was able to come up with my little system that I love. And then I opened my gym. I had the gym that obviously you train at, Paddo Performance.
Yeah.
I had that. I was actually 26 years old when I did open this business. I was
in Paddington.
I was very blindsided by what business entailed. I opened up a clinic on Oxford Street, Paddington. So anyone that knows Sydney knows that that's the most red hot part of Sydney.
Yeah.
I signed a $200,000 a year lease without even knowing what I got myself into. I think I had like $20,000, $30,000 in my bank account at the time.
Yeah.
Signed a lease. And then just went for hell. I borrowed money and opened a business, and opened a cafe, because I thought that would be a great way to have some cash flow into the business, which was great. And it was just been full on ever since.
Yeah. And here, so what year did you guys open Paddo on Oxford Street?
So what I did was we registered the site August 2018. So I registered the business name, and I was talking with a developer in Paddington. So I went and saw a site on Oxford Street, because my parents had salons in Paddington, so I was very familiar with the area growing up. I did love the area. I thought it was a great place to start a business, because in my eyes, you go all in on something. I was like, I'm going to go all in on business. I'm going to go all in on the location. I'm going to overspend. I'm going to overreach for an area that everyone knows, so we can get our name big quick. So I thought to do that. And then in 2018, I spoke to a developer. There was a brand new development happening on Oxford Street. I asked that developer and the agents about the tenancy downstairs, the ground floor tenancy. And I said, has anyone actually taken it on yet? It was still under construction. They go, no, we're looking to have this ready by 2019. I said, I'd like to take this site on, and we came to a price and everything. And I then, while it was still basically a building zone, I put my needs on it. So I was like, hey, well, we've got to put the bathrooms here, and we've got to put the front here and the clinic rooms here. So from scratch, I built that business. It wasn't an existing, it was just like a concrete shell. And then we built it to be Paddo Performance in 2018. We opened January 2019, and we were there. Obviously, COVID happened a year later. So 1 year into your business, COVID comes. And, look, it wasn't the worst thing for me, obviously, because I could still work as a clinician. I was still able to work as a physio, but it did rock a community in our business. It took a while to regroup from that, but it 3 years being in Paddington, I then thought it was best to consolidate the business where we are now and get a bigger space and open the doors up for more opportunities.
Did you ever have any hesitation going from being in Paddington to where you are now, thinking, are the athletes or the community, are they going to come across to where we are? Or were you like, it's pretty solidified, I know that the people that I value a lot are going to come along, and because I think that would be another representation of your character, being like, yep, I'm confident enough to take this. Not that it's super far away, but it's obviously not Paddington.
Yeah, it's not Paddington. Look, for me, when I was in Paddington, as we said, I really wanted to build a big name. in the business. I wanted to create a brand. I wanted to create something that people wanted to be a part of. I stuck to my guns in terms of what I believed in. I didn't have any group classes or yoga or spin or any of that stuff. For me, it was I want to create a vibe that's hard to replicate. I wanted to create something special that social media would see and people would see, and people want it. It was a destination gym. So I wanted to do that, and Paddington was a place for people that access us. But I always had the intentions of once we built that brand big enough, I would be able to hopefully purchase an investment and make it a long-term thing. I mean, our family over time, they were leasing in the 80s and 90s their hairdressing salons, and over time owner occupied those sites. So they were able to invest back into their business by owning the buildings and renting from themselves. So I thought that was really the only way out as a small business of the vicious cycle. So this opportunity came up and I actually was able to purchase this. So for me, any reservations that I had about moving from Paddington, I would soothe myself knowing that it was so much bigger than just a business. It was a long-term investment for me, just because I believed in this brand so much that I want to own this gym forever. I don't ever want to feel like I can't do this. So that was a big step for me. Look, it did come prematurely. I'll admit I wasn't really ready after 3 years of being in Paddington. It was more of a 5-year plan, but COVID accelerated that. I got everything in order, and luckily for me, I was able to do this. There were some initial hesitations where I'm like, is it going to have the same vibe? Is it going to be the same energy? I mean, that other gym it was electric in there because it was such a small, atmosphere. But then, we did have the cafe. It was Paddington. It was so high intensity in terms of the amount of people coming through and all that. And it was a small site and everyone was on top of each other. It was awesome, but it was also very taxing on myself being there constantly. As you know, this gym's kind of a bit more cruisy. Like, we've still got a lot of people in here, but it's not a gym that, it's overrun. You can come in and do your thing. There's no anxiety around it. But I did have some initial stress, but I think a lot of that stress was more or less about getting the business here, not really what was going to happen after that. There was a lot of stress getting it here. That was the hardest part.
Like, obviously I wasn't training with at Paddo when it was in Paddington, but I think the more I've the longer I go in the industry with training at different gyms, and I've trained at gyms in Adelaide, I've trained at gyms in Melbourne, I've trained at gyms all over the world whenever I've traveled, and I think you obviously can have an objective, opinion of a gym based on its equipment as soon as you walk in, or based on what it possesses that you need access to, and how that can benefit you. But I think that I've been in some gyms with the most phenomenal range of equipment, and it's one of the gyms I dislike the most, or a gym that I dislike the most, purely because of the atmosphere or the people or the environment. And I think, it's a testament to you guys, and just like how well or how great the environment is at Paddo, because the people make that. Everyone's got their little different personality, but everybody's there for a kind of collective goal within themselves. And it's very supportive, but it's also, everybody knows when to kind of get to their work and do what they need to do. And I think that's just a reflection of, like, obviously the equipment is phenomenal, the facility is phenomenal. It feels like you're just training in your own gym that you personally constructed every time, because you've basically done that yourself, and you have so much investment in the actual equipment that's there. But I think people probably underestimate how important the people that you bring into the facility are on what the vibe it gives. And that's probably why it's translated so well from being in Paddington, which is obviously a high-paced, environment and suburb, to being where it is now, which is obviously a little bit more secluded, a little bit more private. But as soon as you walk in there, even when it is, not that it's ever busy, but even when it is a little bit more, cranking, it's still it's a phenomenal environment, and it still feels like
one of the things I made sure when we moved, I really scoped the areas out. One of the biggest things in Sydney, it's hard to find space. As you know, Sydney is hard to find space. You can't find a lot of space. Industrial areas, you can go out west, or you can go far up north or far down south, and you can find space. But for me, being within a certain vicinity of the CBD was really important. In this area, I scoped out because it had access still. It's got really good access from any area you can get here. From being out west, you can jump on the M7, you're close to the airport. You're 10 minutes, on the eastern distributor to the city. You can get up north. So for me, it was the accessibility to the gym was still great. Parking was something that not many people had to stress about, because obviously in Paddington it was hell there. So here there's a bit more, room to breathe. So for me, I saw it as, okay, well, it might be a bit of a shock to the system initially, but once the dust settles and we still continue what we're doing, people will find it easy to get to us. And it'll open up so many more avenues. Like, for example, we do a lot of photo shoots here for brands, and I think the high ceilings and the concrete layout is really, it's a beautiful neutral look to the gym. And everyone just knows us. I don't like to sell out or put branding everywhere and be kind of market in terms of, this month we're going to get 50 new members, we're running a discount. That's not what I believe in. And I don't think the business would benefit from that. And people like athletes like yourself and high level coaches and athletes that come through our facility wouldn't appreciate being overrun by 15, 16-year-olds 24/7. So I do like to keep the standard of the clientele up high. We're price pointed on the higher end, but in my eyes, I mean, you get what you pay for. And as a coach yourself, if you see people charging $20 a week for coaching, you can almost guarantee the results aren't going to be that good. So
like I've said to you many times, I'd happily pay significantly more than that. So it's I'm just honestly, I'm excited. I'm really excited to be there when I'm in the depths of a prep and really be like, this is okay. Now this is even more of a worth the cost, because you don't want to have to be talking to people and doing shit. I'm
adding more. We're adding more, man. I'm going through the process right before this podcast. I was emailing. We're going to be putting another 35 squares in a separate mezzanine. I've got more prime equipment on its way. There's a few pieces I'm going to sub in and out for some more modern pieces. We're going to be updating our bathrooms, adding an extra one, more showers. So for me, it's an ongoing process, and I don't really want to look at bringing on too many new members. The right members, obviously, I will, but the members that we've currently got, I want to give back to them and provide them the best possible environment and space to achieve goals that they wouldn't be able to achieve at any other gym. I'm not interested in the day-to-day clients that just, they're just another number on the account. I'm looking at the clients, okay, well, if this person's loving the space and he's posting about the space and he's using it to what its purpose is, then organically the right people are going to see, because you're going to have a following that's in line with what we believe in. And organically they're going to be like, oh, that gym looks pretty cool. When I'm in Sydney, I'll go there. So I don't need to try and market it. I just got to look after the people that are there and look after the athletes and coaches that I respect. If I give you guys what you want, I will indirectly get the right people coming back to my space, without a doubt.
Yeah. Again, like it translates so well to the industry in which I'm in that, if you look after your athletes, you get them results, they're going to then word of mouth is going to spread. And I don't need to go. I've never once done a sponsored ad on Instagram where I've been like, hey, join Crabtree Performance and whatnot. It's just always organically happened. And, I probably wouldn't feel so bad if I did one, but it's just not really who I am. And I want someone to work with me because they are invested in the way I do things. Not I'm the first person they've seen, or I had a clickbait, little title that kind of got them into the coaching, or for your instance, the gym. But you kind of hit the nail on the head there with the kind of organic perpetuation of business, because me specifically, I was still living in Adelaide and I knew what Paddo Performance was, and I moved to Sydney in 2021. But I remember, I think my first kind of experience of Paddo was back when Mike was doing those outrageous squats and whatnot and stuff like that, shirtless in his underwear and stuff. And I remember looking and thinking, what's this facility? Like, this looks like such a good environment. It's really cool. And, when I moved to Sydney, I probably didn't read into it too much, but I had originally thought it was like something that you'd have to know somebody to then go. And obviously I knew Mike, but I just got to a point where I'm like, you know what? I've had enough of this commercial gym. I won't name any names, but I've had enough of this commercial gym. I'm going to go suss out Paddo. And I knew I've listened to you before. I've listened to the podcast and Mike and whatnot. And, I still, for some reason, probably had an expectation of it being a little bit more click, like, am I allowed here type thing. But as soon as I walked in, I was like, hello, go around here. And that's been everybody I've spoken to. That's their experience as well. So it genuinely, despite it may seem privateered and it may seem, really kind of niche, there's actors at the gym, there's bodybuilders, there's people who are just trying to get healthy here, and
there's mums, there's babies. Like, it's not not what people think.
So it's but it's generally like a phenomenal environment, and just really lucky to be able to do it. But what I was saying was that I obviously had that realization from Mike, and I saw Paddo, and then even me posting the gym on my own stuff, just when I'm training, I basically just take those training clips because I want to look back at them and see, okay, 4 weeks ago, even though I track it down, this is how I was moving this movement relative to, how I'm moving it now with X amount more or X amount less, and just a little bit of, kind of comparative visual data. But even just posting that and tagging the gym, like organically, my own athletes or people who follow me or people who then follow them, like I've had, probably 12 or 15 athletes, at one point in the last year and a bit come through Paddo, whether they're in Sydney or whatnot. And every time, as I've told you, it's, I wish this gym was in Adelaide, or I wish I lived in Sydney, I'd go to this gym, or
you're
are they
great,
going to be
man.
making
all the comp seasons, everyone's come through with you. I appreciate that. It's great. We've had a lot of good people come through off of your back last comp season. It's great. So they're always welcome. People are always welcome to come. That's what the space is for. It's for everyone, but mainly the people that really love and respect equipment and training. It's just that's what it's for.
Yeah. With your business now with Paddo and with Dani, obviously, like what are your guys future plans? I know, is it called MyTrainingSpace? Is that your guys thing?
Yeah, so Dani, actually, funny enough, we just literally had a meeting right before this week. MyTrainingSpace was when we were in COVID. Dani and I really saw there was another area was quite flooded, was the app area. Now it's quite flooded. A lot of people have apps, but to build an app from scratch, we thought, let's be different, because a lot of people have these white label apps that you can just kind of put your brand or whatnot over, which are great. That, you can jump on, you can subscribe, you can get your clients on this app, which is amazing if you've got clients. But we wanted to build something that was ours from scratch, and we went into it a bit blindsided. We didn't really understand what it would take to build an app. And once we did, once we did start, Dani will probably explain this a bit better than me, but it was really full on. It was like learning a different dialect, different language, the IT sphere. So we wanted to create something that would, again, bridge the gap between our services and our gym and people that couldn't access us in our face-to-face services or our online services that couldn't afford that service. So the app would provide people programming, education, rehabilitation, kind of a workout builder side of things, just something that they could jump on, be a part of our community, understand what we do. And we over the years, we've kept refining it, but we still haven't launched it because it's such a big beast to build an app from scratch. So many back-end things. We launched last September, which was really exciting. We did launch without a lot of the features that we wanted to launch with. It's kind of just the programming side of things, but we're going to be launching a workout builder, kind of like a build your own rehab program type thing, hopefully within the next 3 to 4 weeks. But yeah, that's our main. That's kind of our main business right now. Our main focus outside of the gym is really getting that up where we know it should be. In terms of the product quality, I believe it's the best on the market, but it's not really about what's the best on the market. It's about how you market it and who sees it. So, that's for us now. It's just about building that business up, nurturing it, growing it, investing back into it like we did the gym, like we did our own personal businesses. And we're just having a really good time adding to it and growing it. And hopefully that will be our main business, essentially, which will, once that does its thing where we know it should over time, then we can scale back a little bit on the gym in terms of making it a little bit more private. I think the gym deserves that respect in the future. I really would love to make this kind of more of a closed environment for those that really want to use the space properly in the future. For now, we're going to keep it as it is, kind of semi-private, but basically I just want to kick everyone out and train. But no, I won't do that. No, I won't do that. I'm going to keep the right people there.
Yeah. As you were saying before, which I think was a really interesting point. I mean, for me personally, I've been through a few surgeries, most predominantly my knee reconstruction back in 2014, playing Aussie rules. And you spoke about, your initial, I think a lot of people think of a physio and they almost think of kind of like a massage therapist in a way as well, like where they're talking about, if you're thinking of a physio, they're going to kind of massage certain parts of your body, kind of identify certain areas and give you obviously rehabilitation programming, or if they're good to, rehabilitate. But you touched on, you've found that the best kind of method is kind of instructing or identifying specific movement or movement patterns that someone can move through or get better at to, rehabilitate themselves. And I think that's really cool because, there's a lot of people who aren't in Sydney. There's a lot of people who aren't within, reach of you guys at Paddo, and they probably don't realize that, okay, I could reach out to Paul, or I could reach out to Dani, or reach out to whoever, and they could give me physiotherapy because it's movement based and instruction based, rather than you needing to put your hands on somebody, So what was kind of I know you spoke about Andrew and that realization there, but what was kind of those things that made you go from being very, very hands-on to very hands-off and movement and instructional based?
So it's understanding what elements of your rehab are helping the symptoms of the client while we're managing the symptoms of that athlete. There comes the taping, the hands-on, the massage. All those things are quite symptom-based to manage how they're feeling at that time. Whereas how can we identify and assess and treat the cause? So if someone presents to me, a good example is, let's just say someone's got patellar tendinopathy, very common in bodybuilding. They get that pain just under the kneecap. So if someone has patellar tendinopathy, the physiotherapist will prescribe, sometimes they'll prescribe stretches for the quads. They'll prescribe, they'll do some massage through the quads. They might do some mobilizing of the joint. So these are all ways to manage the symptoms, to give that client. They might tape the kneecap, for example.
Yeah.
Whereas my assessment would be, all right, well, what has led to this quadricep or this knee tendon being so loaded over a long period of time where it actually has found the need to inflame? What is the cause of the knee joint having to work so hard? Then I'll take a step back, go over their program, and I would say, hey, I want to uncover things. I strip it right back, strip the layers back. I'll sit down and say, okay, well, what's your gym program look like? They'll tell me their program. I'll say, okay, well, I might see there that they're doing leg extensions for 25 reps into a leg press superset. So I'm like, all right, I flag that. That might be something that's overloading the quadricep tendon. I might see a lack of hip hinging movements. I understand how they're warming up. So I can actually piece together how I want to create a story on how that knee has become where it is now. So once I create that story and identify flags in that area as to why we're here, I can go back and say, well, let's change this, let's swap this, let's assess this movement pattern, let's swap the days that you're training things close together. So I can actually treat them well. I can treat the problem rather than the symptom. And that's definitely the way we're going to fix that problem. And I can do that all via just a Zoom consultation. It's very simple. And I can even see that if I need to see a certain movement, it's very easy over camera. Like if I was to tell you to do a squat right now, you could easily just show me how you squat. It's not that difficult. It's actually better to do it over Zoom, I find.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. And it's probably something that not a lot of people realize. And I mean, even me, like going and playing relatively high level sport as a youngster, it would be the physiotherapists that you would deal with that were facilitated by the club you were playing for would be very much symptoms. So, my quads hurt or my ankle's sore. So we'll massage it, we'll tape it up, and then you're back. Whereas if that was done in the way you're describing, it would be, obviously there is a certain component of that, because you're constantly trying to kind of move through that sport where the symptom-based stuff is there. But if you were identifying that root cause, you'd be going to the coaches and going, hey, these movements that you're putting these athletes through are probably going to lead to X at a certain period of time of overuse. So then you'd go ahead and kind of restructure the whole kind of system or the load in which the athletes are moving through. And I think that's something that, even really high level physiotherapists or, I've had friends that have played professional sports and still do, whether it's the AFL or whatnot. And, you have these kind of soft tissue injuries that just constantly occur every season, every preseason. And it's because these strength and conditioning coaches or these physiotherapists are, like you said, they're treating the symptoms, but the programming of the athletes is still the same year in and year out. Whereas if they had that identifiable way of, saying, okay, these soft tissue injuries we can recover, obviously, but let's stop them occurring, or at least try to stop them occurring in the first place. And that kind of leads into a lot of things. Like even with coaching, you have someone that you're working with, and they're doing something a specific way for so long, and you could go, okay, I want to, for instance, if they're dealing with certain negative outcomes relative to PEDs, you can go, okay, we're going to change your PEDs, we're going to manipulate that, but what else is there that you can, improve? What else is there that you can troubleshoot that can really kind of improve that root cause, whether it's nutrition, whether it's training performance, whether it's sleep, whether it's hygiene, like all of those kind of stresses to, total allostatic load. If you can reduce that, you can really kind of troubleshoot what someone deals with, rather than just fixing the kind of symptom.
There's a lot of factors to consider. There's a lot of factors to consider with rehab, and post-surgical, like you said with your knee, post-surgical is another area that people they come to me because, oh my God, I tore my pec off the bone. I'm going to go see the bodybuilding physio because I want to get back to bodybuilding. But one of the most important things that people need to understand, I primarily don't really work with acute patients, ones that happen acute injury, because there's not so much we can do in the acute phases if a surgery is what that client wants. Different if they don't want to have surgery, they want to get strapped back into rehab. But if someone opts for surgery, what I then tell them is, listen, you're in the hands of your surgeon. They're going to obviously operate however which way. I do just refer them to surgeons that understand. Like, for example, if you're going to fix a knee, the way that they graft or the way that they choose to fix that knee is with the idea of this guy's going to get back to this level of sport or whatever sport you want to do. Like, it needs to be fixed for the purpose of what their goals are, not just to fix the knee. So in an acute case, there's not really much I can do. I'm more of a chronic pain therapist. I'm one that takes the people that are all out of ideas or out of options. I've worked with everyone. I've seen everyone. How can you fix me? So I work with those clients. But in the acute phases, I usually just tell them, once the surgeon has cleared you for movement, they'll usually have a set rule or set kind of exercise program that they give their clients based on the way they've done the surgery. Every surgeon has their own protocol. I'll then say, team up with whatever physio they have, because they are, that's their system that they follow for that surgery. Once you've been cleared for loading, I will then take over, because that's my responsibility when it comes to getting you moving the way you need to for your goal in training. I never like to take them on within a day or two after tearing something. What am I going to do? Whereas once they're cleared for loading, then my specialty can come in and assist. Yeah.
Obviously, when you started out in physiotherapy, you were kind of working within the kind of, I guess, traditional physiotherapy routes, I suppose. Like when you said you're working with that doctor, did you ever have, as you kind of learned more and more and built more and more into your niche? I know that obviously Andrew Locke was, relatively kind of instrumental in helping you understand that. But did you ever have any pushback from like the actual traditional kind of physiotherapy community? Because like obviously you go to physios and they're very eccentric and all very traditional, and they almost you go and if someone was to visit you at Paddo and you're in your kind of basketball top and shorts and Jordans, it's very different to going to someone dressed in a suit and tie with work shoes on and speaking in a very different manner. Did you ever have any kind of pushback with kind of, not that I would say that your obviously the way in which you go about things and you think about things is very much the way I would think it should be done. But was there people who thought, oh no, this physiotherapist that has been, clinically and, tertiary study and education and is doing this alternative methods of physiotherapy, blah, 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 blah. Or did you never have to deal with any of that?
Well, the funny thing is, I mean, even just scaling it right back, I really wanted to become a physio when I hurt myself. Actually, I hurt myself when I was 17. I had these little shoulder injuries. I was training a certain way, and I didn't actually understand what injuries were. I just trained really hard, and I had a few little impingements and bursitis and all these things. And I thought the world was ending when I was young. I didn't understand that, I can't do the exercise I want to do. And I went to a sports physiotherapist, an actual sports physiotherapist, and this was in like 2010. And, he was just treating me. I could just tell that, they had the curtains, they had 4 or 5 different physios there, and they just treated me, give me like one little rotator cuff exercise and put some ice on me and move on to the next. And it was kind of like how many clients they could do at once. And then I kind of pulled him up on it. I don't want to say his name here, but he was a very established physiotherapist at the sports stadium here in Sydney, which was meant to be the best clinic. And I said to him, hey, I really want to get back to bench pressing. I really want to get back. There's an exercise I love to do. And I'm a bodybuilder. I want to compete in the future. And he kind of just laughed at me and goes, look, just don't worry about that exercise. It's no big deal. Just do something else. And then I just thought to myself, you know what? I'm sure that there is a way I can incorporate or learn more from, getting back to doing the things that I love to do. And then that kind of sparked something in me to really kind of like prove this person specifically wrong because I cut the shits with him. But then along the way, then I got into physiotherapy. But my ideas of physiotherapy were, you work with athletes and sports stars, and until I actually went to uni, and I realized the scope of physiotherapy is so much bigger than just private practice. Physiotherapy is one of the most, for example, I worked in stroke. I worked in stroke rehabilitation for a period of time. I worked in traumatic brain injury, getting people back to, quadriplegics, paraplegics, post-car accidents. I worked in ICU, clearing people's chests while their oxygen saturation was plummeting. I worked in orthopedics. These are all areas, aged care, rehab, cardiopulmonary. This is physiotherapy at its core. It's acute rehab. It's getting people out of hospital back home. That's what physiotherapy is. That is what. And I had this appreciation. I was like, this is actually what physio is. My grandma's in hospital right now with a broken hip, and she's with the physio there, working out a plan daily to get moving on a broken hip. And that is, to me, that is in its purest form physiotherapy. What I do and how I treat is for a very small niche. Very small niche. I love what I do, and no one else. There aren't so many people that can do what I do. But I have to always pay my respects to the physiotherapists that are in the front line in the acute care sector, that are working with people after a car accident, after a stroke, after a hemorrhage, an aneurysm. This is neurophysiotherapy, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, neurosurgery. Like, this is physiotherapy. And again, back to your original question to divert, I did have a lot of pushback. Yes, there was a lot of people that were like, there's certain ways you have to assess. Have you not checked this? Have you not cleared this? Have you not done that? And then I started to not doubt myself, but be like, I'm getting all these good results. Is it actually, am I doing a good job? Or can I be doing so much more? And then I stopped and I thought, it's not necessarily my skills as a physio. It's, am I attracting the right client or my skills? Because I niched my skill set right to a point where there are only a real few people. Everyone could benefit from it, but there are only a few people that are going to actually properly listen and go through that process with me. So I really had to market myself and promote myself for the clientele that I really wanted to. Not to say that I wouldn't treat everyone, because I have had great results of people that you would never expect, like office workers and people that have no desire to be bodybuilders. I've helped a lot of them. But I did have a lot of pushback early on, just because if you took someone 10 years ago and got them squatting with knee pain, people would be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Whereas my belief was the exercises that cause you the most pain or most discomfort give me the most information on the injury. I could learn from those. I could understand what's happening. Why is it hurting? What's going on? Where's the loading? I learned the most from those movements that are causing the grief. But yeah, we got there in the end. And I think the quality of having clients, again, like Mike, like Hattie Boydell, like IFBB pros along the way, having these top level clients along the way and helping them, it kind of validated my skill set to a lot of the people in the industry.
Yeah, mate, this is almost therapeutic for me, to be honest, because when I was, what was I, in 2014, I was 15, 16, and obviously, tore my ACL. What I did was, and the listeners who listen to this, I nearly somehow talk about this every episode. So, but I don't know if I've spoken to you about it, but I tore my ACL, so tore my meniscus, tore my MCL, and broke my femur. Not all at once. Yeah, but I think what actually happened was I either did the ACL first up, and you might be able to have more clarity on that than I do. I can't remember specifically what they said, but I was playing, and I think I did the ACL initially. So I was being tackled by two people at the same time, being pulled down while my right leg came off the ground, and I was twisting. So I had all their weight and my weight on my knee joint that twisted, and I felt that immediate kind of ow. But as a 15-year-old, you're like, there's no way I've torn my ACL. I'm 15. I'm indestructible. Yeah. I went off for 5 minutes. The pain went away. I still couldn't have full flexion of my leg. So it felt like there was something that was impinging my knee from going.
You couldn't lock it at end range extension? Like you couldn't lock it in range?
Couldn't lock it out. It was probably 10% before I could completely lock. which I think what they described was that was the ACL. It was, you know, kind of ruptured or whatnot. And then I went back on once the pain had subsided. Obviously it was swollen, whatever. But, you know, as I said, you're 15 years old and you're like, there's not an ACL. I probably just fucking banged up my knee or something. I actually played reasonably okay for about half a quarter, even sort of like some lateral movements here or there. It was painful, obviously adrenaline. And then I went to basically change direction in one specific contest, and I put my weight onto that knee, and it almost felt like my knee or my leg just went away. Like I just fell onto my leg, like it kind of collapsed beneath me. And I think that was when I did the MCL meniscus and broke my leg. It was only a small fracture, but it kind of just like, it was like a rubber band that was just unraveling because I was kind of putting more pressure on it. And then I obviously the swelling was immense. You know, I didn't have the biggest legs as a 15-year-old kid. So what was swollen around that was huge, but went to a notoriously now not the greatest physiotherapy facility or business in Adelaide. They've kind of they were seen to be at that time where you would go to be like the AFL players went there and whatnot, and they were seen to be kind of the pinnacle. But like, as you said, it was very churn. Like, let's get as many people in here as we can and let's push them off to the next thing. They're athletes, they'll recover. And I went, you know, spoke, and he was probably about 70, the guy, the physiotherapist that I saw. I went in there, 15 years old, had no inclination it was going to be an ACL tear. I was like, oh, it'll be a fucking, you know, something. I actually thought it might have been something to do with my hamstring, like low hamstring, because I couldn't obviously have that full lockout. But I went in there, he basically grabbed my knee, went ding, ding, up and down, and said, ACL tear, you're not going to play footy again for at least, you know, 12, 16 months. And this was leading into the draft year that you would go and I'm fucking 16, 15 years old, and I'm going, this guy has no empathy whatsoever, firstly.
No.
For this. He doesn't care. And I was like, oh, well, you know, are you sure? Like, you've only basically just kind of jigged around with my knee. And he's like, oh, I think there's much more than that. So if anything, it might be like a 2-year thing, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, all right, if that is the case, like, can we go and get some stuff? And you're like, yeah, we'll have to do some scans, and then you have to wait a bit to get those scans back and whatnot. And I said, okay, well, if it is worst case scenario, because the way I think about things is I like to prepare for the worst case scenario. I don't want anyone telling me that it's potential to not be. I'm like, okay, you've told me this. Let me at least prepare myself for the worst, and anything that's not that is better. So he's like, oh, you know, you're going to be off your feet for this amount of time, and you're not going to be playing footy, and you're not going to be going to the gym, because I was still interested in the gym at that point as well and building my physique around footy. You're not going to be doing this and that. And then obviously I had year 11 and 12 to go. He's like, you're going to have to take time off school and blah, blah, blah. So that was just, you know, and then it ended up being accurate to a certain extent, obviously much more damage than even I think what he thought. But then the rehabilitation was, or the symptom treatment was obviously the surgery. I went to a surgeon that did a hamstring graft, which I don't know if I'd do that these days with like how much of a fucking grind it's been to get my hamstring back, like from a bodybuilding and from a superficial standpoint. It's never going to look the same as the one on the right. Even, you know, and then the recovery after that, was basically no rehabilitation work, no load bearing, no nothing. I was in a cast for 2 months and I was on crutches for probably 3 to 4. By the time I'd taken all that stuff off, my leg was like, if you saw the photo, it was like my forearm.
Yeah,
and
well, the cast probably would have been for the fracture primarily, because with ACL rehabs, usually they get, you know, they don't put a cast on them now these days. You kind of get straight back into certain plane movements like closed chain exercises, balance work. You avoid any running or any open chain exercises initially, but that assessment he would have done on you in the early stages it's usually a Lockman's test, where they can because the ACL is responsible for the stopping any like anterior shear of that tibia. So if he can loosely lift it up and there's no resistance, it shows that there's no ACL there, because he can get movement out of it. They're pretty easy to assess. Usually on the field, when a footy player goes down, the physio runs out there and does that assessment, and they know really quickly, oh shit, if there's resistance, it means the ACL is still intact. If it's open, it's fucked. But no, usually it's very different these days with their rehab. And as you said, the hamstring graft, all I've ever seen in my bodybuilders that have had ACLs is the difficulty to get back that hamstring function is very, very, very challenging. And they don't actually do that. In elite athletes, they do a synthetic. They do a synthetic ACL. They don't actually use the hamstring graft because they don't want to have to weaken one area to strengthen another. But the only problem with that is usually only lasts about 10 years. So 10 years is like a professional athlete's career, and they don't care about you after that.
Yeah. It's interesting in that it's probably not what you would prescribe someone to do, but me being, fucking arrogant 16-year-old, 15-year-old, I was told, I couldn't do anything with the cast and couldn't do anything with the crutches. But as soon as that came off, I had this rehabilitation plan, and it was like I was being held like a bull at a gate. Like I was just like, fuck this, I'm ready to go. Let me get back into something to do with any sort of physical movement. And my physio was like, oh, you're going to have to start with some light walking for the first couple of weeks. And then it's going to be, some kind of, jump, what's it called? Like hop, skip, jump fucking stuff where you're jumping on through ladders and hoops and stuff. And I just was, I just was like to myself, look, I'm not going to do anything stupid. I'm not going to go and try and do an agility test in, the next 6 months, but I'm getting into the gym. I was like, I don't give a fuck about this fucking hop, skip, and a jump stuff. I went and started load bearing on my knee probably 5 months after that through I was doing no weight on the leg press, single leg stuff. I think I was most concerned, to be honest, about the fucking visual difference that my left leg had to my right. And then that I initially just went in there and wanted to do, really kind of isolation movements or stuff to strengthen the quad and leg in of itself, which they obviously advised against, and they didn't know I was doing. I don't think my parents listening to this are probably, fucking, freaking out because I've never told them this, but I basically did none of that, whatever you would describe that to be, that prescribed physiotherapy work. And I just started doing my own strength training on that knee. And I'm sure there's a certain component of that because when I did that injury, I had initially, and I had the surgery, I'd initially intended to go back and play footy. I was like, I still want to get drafted and I still want to play. And by the time I'd taken the cast off, there was nothing that I had left for it. I don't want to ever go through this again. So I went into basically my rehabilitation with the physios thinking I was going to intend to come back and play. And my intention was, I just want to be a bodybuilder now. I just want to go into the gym. I want to train. I want to have fun. So my immediate focus was, and funnily enough, I feel like, I don't know, there's no tangible measurement that I can make on that, but I feel like my left leg and my left knee quad is actually stronger than my right now. So the one I injured is stronger than my right because I placed so much emphasis on that unilateral work over that time. Whereas I was being told to, do nothing and take small steps forward with regards to walking. And, that's something you've touched on a lot, is kind of getting back into those movements. And I also identified, I don't know how, I can't remember, but I identified that I probably was training in a way that wasn't the smartest. Like I'd load up the leg press. I mean, I'd train every day for football, every single day. And then I'd load up these load bearing movements like leg press and squats and do them terribly. So it probably contributed to how weak the ACL was for me to just be able to tear it like that. Obviously it wasn't just an innocuous thing, but I think my body was probably cooked regardless, and it would have been another injury if it wasn't that. The demand when you're kind of at that level of, especially in Adelaide, footy's like a religion. So, but I think it's interesting.
ACLs. Sorry to cut you off. The ACL is what you did and how you rehabilitated that is kind of like where the rehab is now. Like all the things you did, strength work and moving it straight into that side of things. That's what we prescribe post ACL now. There is a lot of, obviously we want to get the range of motion back first. We want to allow the graft to heal and catch. But once those two, we're confident of those two parts, then we want to strengthen it. And once we strengthen it, it's all, exercise and movement. And that's what we do now. It's not what it used to be where it was very cautious around it. As a matter of fact, most of the time now, I actually got my mum in on a clinical trial because she did her ACL. She slipped over and ruptured her ACL. I got her on a clinical trial where they actually didn't operate on her. So she did one of the ones where she had to keep her knee at 90 degrees in a brace for most of the day. And there were signs of the ACL, on a scan, the ACL grew back. It grew back and healed. And she now is back to full function. Training every day. She's on her feet every day. She wears high heels. She's fucking cutting hair and she's in no pain. So she was able to rehabilitate her ACL with no surgery. Now, the surgery obviously is very important for elite level athletes because they need that confidence to be able to change direction and whatnot. But these days the rehab protocol is you're basically 100% at that 6 to 9 month period. But to allow you to weight bear and change direction at full pace and move and put weight on and off it, they usually stretch it out now to 9 to 12 months. Because if you think about it, the chance of re-injuring it will set you back another 9 months. So they almost push you out to 12 months now just to ensure that it's 100% before you start putting weight through it. ACLs are still, in my opinion, out of all the injuries we see in clinic or the injuries we see, it's still the one that's just like when you cop it, it's a 9 to 12 month injury. There are not many injuries like that anymore. Like we rehabilitate pecs now within 10 weeks. A ruptured pec, people are back playing sport within 10 weeks.
Well, back in the 60s and 70s, the ACL used to be a career-ending injury.
Career-ending. Once you got it, it was done. You're finished.
So it's crazy how quickly stuff moves forward. But my actual knee, ACL, and the strength and I think like tendon ligament strength of my actual knee, because I put so much load over time effectively and trained smartly and whatnot, know how to go through that movement pattern. I feel like it's so strong. The only issue that I deal with today, which is kind of just constant, is the meniscus. Because they went in there and they had to kind of shave down the meniscus because it was all flared up, I think is kind of how they described it. So down my tibia is just constant like little tingles all the time, and the knee kind of hurts if I sit in the position I'm in now with my kind of leg at that 90 degrees. So that's what I deal with now. But in terms of the actual like ACL itself and the surrounding ligaments and tendon, I feel like someone could hit it with a sledgehammer and it'd be like, no worries.
That's from your training. That's from weight. That's lifting weights. That's, hack squats, leg press squatting, lunging, leg extensions, hamstring curls. That's the combination of all that work has built the muscle up around it. And that muscle takes the pressure off the joint. Muscle is so good. We love muscle because muscle takes pressure off the joint. Look at, for example, Ronnie Coleman. He had all that muscle around his body and that was taking all the pressure off. People don't realize with Ronnie Coleman, he actually hurt his disc very early on in his career. He had a disc herniation in like 1997, and he managed that through his bodybuilding career. And because he had so much muscle and he had, he was so strong, he really was able to still compete and win 8 Mr. Olympias with those herniated discs because he had so much muscle supporting his spine. The problem actually came once he stopped training as much, and he obviously stopped all the enhancements and he lost a lot of weight, and that muscle integrity around that spinal area was less and less and less. And then his symptoms, got worse, and he got a surgery a couple of surgeries were botched. That was the problem. And those botched surgeries led to the nerve flare-ups, and now he's obviously not able or not as mobile as what he was. But I love how people, I can't stand how they associate heavy lifting with Ronnie Coleman being in a wheelchair when the only thing that kept him going through those years with the herniated disc to able to compete and win Mr. Olympia and be strong was the amount of muscle that he built from those exercises. It's just what happened afterwards with the botched surgeries and, however they wish to do that. That's where the error was. That's what happened when the nerves started to get really, flared up.
Yeah. No, that's honestly, it's really interesting because that was going to kind of lead me into my final question was I'm not involved in those kind of sport. I mean, I coach a few people that I used to be, I'm still friends with that used to be played with and teammates and stuff like that. But the junior sporting scene, especially from an Aussie rule standpoint, is so like overload. Like you're a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid training every day, playing games Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The amount of load on your joints and tendons and ligaments at that age is just astronomical, more than even a professional athlete. They train, but they have managed loads. Whereas back then when 2014, 15, 16, when I was playing, it was no strength and conditioning work. And we had strength and conditioning coaches, but it was not in the gym. If it was anything, it was like some plyometric stuff or some body weight stuff, but it was never we want to be as fit as possible. Therefore we need to have as little muscle as possible because we don't want to have to kind of, have a lot of oxygen to fuel that muscle tissue. But I think I probably never would have dealt with that injury if I had strength and muscle tissue around. And I look back at my legs and I'm like, they were fucking tiny. Like no matter, I'm surprised there wasn't greater injuries. And yes, you wouldn't want to be a bodybuilder size playing rugby or playing Aussie rules footy, but there's a certain component, I think, almost negligence, where that just muscle tissue is just pushed to the side, thinking that it's this negative thing that's going to impact your ability to execute. Whereas it probably would, up to a certain point, if done well and properly and load managed, would actually contribute significantly to reducing those soft tissue injuries, to reducing those ligament injuries, ACLs, all those types of things. And it's interesting. I was going to say to you, how much of an emphasis do you think on building muscle tissue around those joints and ligaments, is actually necessary?
I think it's everything. I think it's the most important thing when it comes to how you build your athlete up. Like if we look at professional athletes, I can speak from a rugby league standpoint because I love rugby league. I'm born and bred. I know you're an AFL man. I've recently gotten into the AFL. I've always kind of kept an eye on the AFL because
I see the Collingwood in the back. Is that Dani's?
Yeah, that's Dani's. She's a Collingwood fan. Yeah, she's.
I'm Essendon, so she's gonna fucking hate that.
Yeah, she's got tickets to the Anzac Day game actually, so she'll be going down to that. Which is funny because she does have that there, and I'm like, well, where the fuck's my foot? My Dragon, my NRL team's over there in the corner. But I'm a big league man, but I can safely say that the more muscle we build relative to our sport. So I see a lot of athletes, they're doing these box squats and they're loading up certain movements, and I look at it and think there's so many flaws in that programming. I worked with a couple of elite level league players at one point when they had shoulder surgery and they were trying to come back from their shoulder injuries, and they showed me what they were doing. I always like to ask people, what do you prescribe? What are you doing right now? And they showed me what they were doing for their bench pressing as a part of their, they were contracted for first grade. They were on a top 30 roster for first grade rugby league team. And they showed me their program and they showed me what they were doing. And I saw a few issues with their bench pressing and their dumbbell pressing. And I go, oh, okay. This is probably one of the main factors leading to your inability to rehab properly. So I changed a few things in their technique, a little bit more emphasis on the thoracic spine, scapular positioning, how they were bracing, breathing, some of the leg drive, obviously their warm up protocol. I just changed a few things. In a matter of weeks, he said to me, I've never been in less pain in my shoulder through this process. It feels amazing. I'm lifting heavier than ever. I feel really good. Once they went back to their off-season, with their club. The physio or strength conditioning coaches at the club saw what they were doing and banned it. He banned it. He said, this isn't allowed in this facility. I don't want you doing this exercise. Go back to doing it the way we taught you. And then again, he just was back into pain. His shoulder hurt again. So it just shows that there are limitations. A lot of these jobs of these conditioning coaches and whatnot, they've been around for a long time. Their associations with the club, they've been there forever. There's always going to be politics in those areas, but I believe that if it's also positional as well. Like if you're looking at from rugby league standpoint, every single position has different demands. So how I choose to strengthen that athlete will be based on what their roles and demands are. If I've got someone that's doing a lot of directional changes and acceleration, I'm going to tailor their strength and conditioning program to that. If I've got someone that's running straight lines or running down corridors or doing those certain things, it'll be very straight up and down power and strength. So position plays a large role in how we choose to build our athletes up, depending on the demands. Athletes that get interchanged in rugby league, ones that play 40 minutes, are going to have different loads to those that play 80 minutes. So I believe there is a massive issue with people understanding the technicalities of the movements. Just because you're squatting doesn't mean you're actually squatting. There's a squat and there's a squat. So how these guys prescribe what they think is a correct squat. I might look at someone and say they've got poor ankle mobility, elevate their heels. They've got longer femurs, so their ranges are going to be different. The lower back is rounding. We have to understand why is that occurring? Is it a hip mobility thing? Is it a core issue? Some people wear the bar position on their back. Some people suit a low bar squat based on their biomechanics. Some people don't need a high bar squat. So just getting someone in the gym and just doing squats is not the right thing to do. Everything needs to be tailored to an individual athlete. Every single athlete at a high level should be on a tailored warm-up sequence for them and their injuries and their history and their demands for their training. It shouldn't be just grouped stuff. It should be all tailored specifically to those athletes, I believe.
Yep. No, that's phenomenal, man. I appreciate you jumping on, and there's so much information here that I think both the bodybuilding community and non-bodybuilding community would be really interested in hearing. But before we wrap it up, and I'll let you go, I've got one final question for you, which it might catch you off guard a little, but take your time. I can cut it if you're thinking for a while. I've asked this of every guest. If you were to have dinner with 3 people, alive or dead, fictional, non-fictional, who would you choose to have at your dinner and why?
It's a fantastic question. That is a very, very, very good question. I feel like whoever I say now, if I stop and think about it for another hour, I'll be like, damn, I should have said that person.
Yeah, it's like that. That's why I don't ask 3, because I like to have people kind of on the spot think about it.
It's a very good question. I feel like I'd love to sit down with Achilles from the Trojan War. I'd want to understand. Yeah. He's someone that maybe because I've seen the movie Troy a million times. I love the movie Troy. Yeah, I love the movie Troy. So I'd pick the actual Achilles. I'd want to pick his brain. I would love to. Who else? Who's some of this? Probably Tupac. I'm a big Tupac fan.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting one. Achilles and Tupac.
Achilles and Tupac. I like that'd be a good combo. And then now I want to pick someone that would have more intel into like conspiracy theories of the world. I'm very deep in my conspiracy theories. I'd want to go down the path of someone who has knowledge far greater than we would ever. I want to ask questions to someone that knows I'm going down a real big wormhole of like ancient Egypt at the moment.
Yeah. It'd be a Joe Rogan type guest, I think. Like there's been a fair few of those guys on who've talked about the whole. Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
I love it. I without because look, there's so many people, sporting athletes. I would pick, like obviously there's heaps of like Muhammad Ali or certain athletes down that way, or even Marlon Brando, because I'm a big Godfather fan. I love The Godfather. I love those movies. If we're talking about bodybuilding again, someone that I respected, who I loved, one of my favorite bodybuilders growing up early on was Paul DeMeo. Loved him, Quadzilla. But I feel like if I'm going to sit down with these people, it'd have to be beyond bodybuilding. I feel like it has to be someone greater than bodybuilding. I'd probably say someone that probably like a pharaoh from ancient Egypt.
Yeah, that'd be sick.
Because I want to know whether the aliens. I want to know if like aliens or extraterrestrials. I just want to know what the purpose of the pyramids were. I want to know what are they, who built them, how did they take so long, I just want to know the details of that. I thought that'll uncover so many different things.
I think the thing that interests me most about the pyramids, I don't know if you've seen how they're kind of from above, they're like perfectly aligned with some kind of like I don't know what it is.
These columns underneath. These columns. I'm wrapping my mind around these columns.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I
think that I don't know if you watched that Joe Rogan episode, maybe a couple months ago. There was someone like a Egyptologist or whatever the fuck you would call it. That came on, and they were saying that the Egyptians at that point in time in human civilization, or even before that, were so much more advanced as a civilization than we are now, even with all of our technology in terms of like the methods they use to create things and whatnot, and currency and stuff. And then there was this big reset of civilization, and it's going to be however many millions of years before we even get back to 1/100th of the ability to have the same systems as they did. And that's why they can't explain how it was done, because we don't have the ability to fathom what they had done as a civilization back then.
That's what interests me. And also seeing that, like, one of the things I read, it said that Cleopatra was closer to our time now than she was to when the pyramids were built.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So I see those things closer to using an iPhone. Cleopatra is closer to using an iPhone than what she was to when the pyramids were built. So that's where I'm like, I need to know answers. I need answers.
I saw something the other day that was really true. It's got nothing to do with Egypt, but it was a thing on Facebook, and it said 1990 to 2025 is the same distance as 1990 and 1955.
See, that's fucked.
That's cooked.
I was
That
born
makes
in
me-
1992, so I feel
Yeah.
like that makes me.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I'm 33 this year. Time flies.
Yeah. Last one before I let you go. I haven't asked this to anybody yet, but I think you're well versed in asking it. If you had to have a Mount Rushmore of wrestlers, who would you have in Mount Rushmore? So you got four. I think Mount Rushmore has 4 heads. So who are your 4 WWE, WWF goats?
So there are obviously wrestlers that revolutionized wrestling as a whole, and I can only speak up until probably around 2008, 2009, because that's when my peak watching wrestling was like 1997 to 2009. Now everything after that, there have been some big, like obviously like The Rock, John Cena, Roman Reigns. These are your new wrestlers that, The Rock is the biggest there is because of his ability to, be a movie star. John Cena's longevity, how long he's lasted. But if you were to ask me who my wrestlers are, the wrestlers that I grew up loving and the ones that were my favorites that I love, Triple H is my man. I loved him all the way through. I love Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner. Because he was the one that his physique to me was what really got me into the thought of how can a human look like this? I need to be like this. I need to be like him. So I'll go Triple H, Scott Steiner. I have to say Shawn Michaels, HBK. I have to say HBK. I was a big NWO fan. I loved Kevin Nash, Sting, Scott Hall. But I would have to probably say, just for the sake of it, I have to put Hulk Hogan in there. Hollywood Hulk Hogan from WCW.
That's sick.
But then I love Goldberg as well. I'm a big Goldberg man. I actually competed. My last show, I came out to Goldberg's theme song. That was my first routine.
That's a good theme song too.
That's a good one. But I'd probably say Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Hulk Hogan, and Scott Steiner. They're my personal ones that I love.
It's crazy, just like the different. Like I'm only a couple years younger than you, but there's the different generation. Like I think I started probably watching in 2004 or 5, and probably went until it started to get really fucking terrible in like 2012, 13. Like once John Cena and The Rock had kind of done their thing, like 2014, 15, 16, 17 was like absolute trash. And then 2018, 19, I've come back, and since then, so I'm kind of like, I know those old, like I love Stone Cold, and I never watched WWE when he was in there, so he'd be one for me. John Cena, definitely, just like that's my generation's. Jeff Hardy, I'm a big
Hardy
fucking
boys,
Jeff Hardy.
Swanton Bomb.
And then probably the Undertaker, to be honest. Like there's just not like sitting down and as a fucking 10-year-old and seeing this dude come out like the way he did. I genuinely
Did you see him as the American badass with the motorbike, or did you see him
only really? I actually, funnily enough, I was having this conversation a couple of months ago, I think with my dad, and I was saying that when he was the American badass, that was like 2002, 2003, I think. And then once maybe 2005 or 6, he came back as the Undertaker.
As a dead man.
I thought it was a different fucking person.
Yeah.
I remember looking like, where the fuck did this American badass go?
Because he was the dead man in the 90s. He was the dead man in the 90s, and then he went away as the badass, and he came back as the dead man. So that's what. I saw both that. It's crazy.
It wasn't until maybe 2010 that I was like, oh, that was, and I had fucking the internet and my phone, and I'm like, that was the same fucking person. Holy shit. So
that era, I separated a bit because I loved WCW because it was fucking brutal, but then I also loved WWF at the time. I watched them both, and they were competing against each other. It was just wild, man. That late 90s era of who was with WWF and who was with WCW, it was crazy. We had Sting and like some of the fights on a standard WCW fight was like one of the greatest. It was like a pay-per-view, but it was too big for its own shoes, whereas WWF was more consistent. It was more, they saw the long-term vision. But then when everyone came over to WWF, obviously WCW died in 97, 98. And then I loved WWE. Then it turned WWE. But like Austin, Rock, Kane, Undertaker, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, Scott Hall. These guys are all, I loved wrestling, man. Wrestling was, to me, it really made us feel like men growing up, like boys. Like that's what we wanted to look like, wrestlers. We didn't want to look like TikTokers. We wanted to look like wrestlers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember Triple H's physique, like, maybe 2002, 2000.
Dave Palumbo prepped him. Dave Palumbo prepped him. That was the coach.
There was one, when he came back, they all get fucking jacked when they come back from a big injury. They walk out from, even Randy Orton a couple of years ago came back from like a fusion surgery. He was fucking huge. But yeah, it's have you been paying much attention to like what's going on the last like little bit, or?
I've seen that John Cena became a bad guy, which was pretty big. I saw that.
Yeah, that was cool. Yeah, that was cool. So no, it's definitely picked since they've got I mean, he obviously has done amazing things, but since they kind of transitioned away from Vince and went back, and now Triple H is kind of the orchestrator of it all. It's definitely like they're back swearing, there's blood.
That's how it should be.
Yeah. It's the PG era is done, so that's
good. It's got to go. It's got to go.
Nah, but mate, I really appreciate you taking the time to jump on. I know you're a very busy man, and we'll have to do this again sometime because obviously we could talk all day, every day. But mate, as I said, there'll be plenty of information and insight into everything that we've spoken about today for all the listeners. So really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the gym very, very soon.
Thanks for having me on, and I'll probably see you in the gym over the next couple of days.
No worries, mate. Talk soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Taylor. See you, mate. Bye.
Live, motherfucker, as we proceed.